The Chicago Tribune called my next guest the country's leading Gershwin pianist and called his latest recording a revolutionary, what was the exact word? A revelatory new recording of Gershwin's landmark Concerto in F. For that, I welcome Kevin Cole. How are you, Kevin? Thank you for joining me.
I'm very well, Jay. Thanks for having me on board today.
So, this review in the Chicago Tribune said basically that this is the way that the composer intended. I don't think it gets better than that, does it?
No. Anytime you get a review like that, it's a gift, first of all, because you're trying to do your best. And since Gershwin has been, I don't want to say in my blood, but he's been on my shoulder most of my career, to have that kind of verbiage said about your performance is what you hope for. Because what makes this recording, first of all, stand out is that recently the scores have been restored back to Gershwin's original markings, notes, everything. Because, things get edited over time.
Sure.
So we were the first recording to use these, they call them texts, or the real deal.
So if I think about it, this is a recording from Naxos, which is, for persons who don't know about classical music recordings, one of the very largest, high quality, if you will, of the, labels. I think that is very, very safe to say. Is this your first time with a large label like this?
Yeah, this is my first commercial recording. I have produced myself in about 5 different recordings and CDs available for sale at my concerts or
Sure,
through Amazon or whatnot. But this is my very first commercial recording, and so it was very exciting. I mean, Jay, that so many of the big record companies, they don't promote like back in the day anymore, and there aren't that many. They still are pressing CDs, but most people are streaming this online, which I understand. But it's a big deal because there are 4 works that Gershwin wrote for piano and orchestra that I play all over the world. And this is the major one because it's an actual concerto.
Actual concerto, right.
Yeah, for piano.
Right.
Where the other works are rhapsodies.
Raps and blue, right.
Yeah, variations. But this is as big. This is, over a half hour long. I mean, it's a big work. And so the idea, fingers crossed, is that in the summer of 2022, I'll record the other 3 works in time for the Rhapsody in Blue Centennial, which is in 2024, and the Concerto in F Centennial, which is in 2025. Yeah.
So tell me, how did the whole process go? Like, how did you get approached by the record company? How long did that whole thing go? People don't know how this works. I don't know. I've got like a billion questions for you, but let's just start there.
Okay. Well, it starts with the conductor, because any soloist, for the most part, is hired because the conductor says, I want to work with them. I think they would be great for this program of Beethoven or Gershwin or Bach. And sometimes, I should say most times, the conductor has already worked with the soloist, so they know what they bring to the table.
I got you. Now, is that your background, Kevin? So maybe you can tell us, if you wind back the clock on how you got started in music at all, I'd like to, talk about that.
Sure.
Were you
it was by happenstance.
Composition or?
No, it was playing piano. It was really by luck in the way, because I'm the youngest of 3 boys.
Okay.
My father played piano. He had 3 years of piano lessons as a young child. He switched to trumpet by junior high school and had 6 years of trumpet and loved music. And when he got married, he was hoping one of his 3 boys might do something with music because he enjoyed it so much. My mom, as far back as I can remember, she just loved all the old songs, all the old popular songs from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So she was always singing those, as holding me as a child, and I'm sure my brothers as well. And they had a very eclectic record collection. They didn't favor one thing. They had everything in their collection. And we're always playing records. So we were exposed to it. It was a music household in that respect. Not a performance household, because my parents were not performers. But they loved music and songs and dancing and all that. Okay. So one of my dad's 6 brothers and sisters, so Sister Margaret, lived in Detroit at the time, and she was getting rid of an old upright piano.
Okay.
Now, my folks had already noticed that in the crib, anytime music was playing, if it was a record, the radio, TV, I was moving to it and I was reacting to it. So they thought something might be there. Okay. So my aunt, my dad's sister, asked my dad's family, anybody wants this piano? Just pay for the moving from Detroit, because everyone was living in Bay City at the time. And nobody said anything except my dad thought, I played piano and we should have a piano in the house because maybe one of the boys would like it. Fine. So that's what happened. And Jay, in all honesty, I needed something to express what was boiling up inside of me. And it just happened that the piano came into the house. If my dad would have put a trumpet in my hand, a guitar, anything, I think I would have tried to master it or dug into it, because it would have been my conduit to connecting to music.
So were you trained, or
yeah, we started with lessons. I was 4.5. We started with lessons. We just got a local teacher that was recommended because she was dating my mom's brother at the time. Right. So, and then she later became my aunt.
Do you remember the teacher's name?
Oh yeah, Bonnie. Well, it was Bonnie Brett at the time.
Okay.
Then she married my uncle and became Bonnie Lukowski. And she taught out of Grinnell's first, which was a store here. But then she taught out of Music Center in Bay City. But she, in those days, though, this is how ancient I am. The piano teachers used to drive to people's homes to give lessons. You didn't go to some of them you went to their house, or some of them you'd go to Music Center. But she drove to everyone's house, and she had, oh my God, I swear, I know she had like 60 to 70 students weekly. And I think the first lesson, my mom has the receipt because, I have a Polish mom. I love my Polish mom, but they save everything, okay? They make good detectives because they have every shred of evidence. Okay, so she has the first receipt she paid for the lesson, and I think it was $1.25 for an hour. So that's how it started. I started lessons, and then I took to it. I mean, within the first 6 months, I could read music and play. And I mean, I was devouring music. She couldn't get it to me fast enough. She'd say, okay, next week we're going to do this piece and this piece. She'd turn the pages, and I'd say, I already played that. Well, let me hear it. And I'd play it. She'd, okay, then she'd turn a few more. I already played that. Because when I'd get done practicing the lesson for the following week, I was already going ahead because that wasn't enough to feed me. I don't want to say it came easy. It wasn't so much that. It was just, it wasn't enough to satisfy me just having 2 or 3 pieces for the following week.
How long, or who was it? Was it your teacher who said, Kevin, actually, in addition to being a hobby, this should be something more serious for you? Yeah. Did you always have that?
What's interesting, it wasn't with my first teacher. It actually was with my second teacher, which was at the Holy Rosary Academy in Bay City, which pretty much was run by nuns, a certain order of nuns.
Sure.
And it was recommended that I move on to a teacher that could take me to the next level, because I wasn't going anywhere with Aunt Bonnie, bless her heart.
Well, there can be limits. There are limits.
Right. And the thing is, it was hard for her to let me go because basically I was her cash cow.
You're the star pupil, of course.
Well, right. And she'd have these recitals, Jay. They would go on, I'm not lying, 3 to 4 to almost 5 hours because she had so many students. And she never taught her students that if you make a mistake in the middle of the piece, keep going. No, they would go back to the beginning and start over.
Okay.
So you can imagine how many, some people had 4 or 5 mistakes, and you're like, oh, this will never. And I was always last on the program, of course. So I was attracting students because, wow, Bonnie's teaching Kevin. Listen to how he plays. She's got to be a great teacher.
Right.
And so, so that was part of the picture. So someone said, it's time. Kevin, has he ever gone to Interlochen or Blue Lake or some of these summer programs? Has he ever entered any competitions? No. And here I am already approaching 7th grade. So I've been with her, what, eight going on 9 years already. So anyway, once I switched over to Sister Catherine, was her name, Sister Catherine Williams, she entered me in the Bay Music Foundation scholarship competition, my first competition ever. And in doing so, I won for the intermediate division with the highest score they had ever given anyone out of a possible 100. You'll love this. I got 96 and 3/4.
That's how you got the exposure originally. Of course, Interlochen being National Music Camp, with lots of different exposures of performers and other fellow students. From there, where did you go? You went to conservatory for college?
Well, no, here's the deal. This was interesting. Right after graduating in 77 from the Interlochen Arts Academy, of course, during that year, I had been sending in audition tapes and materials. And I was, being offered scholarships to U of M, Michigan State. I had also applied to Manhattan School of Music, Juilliard, and USC. I think those were my 5, because they wanted you to do at least 4 or 5 applications. And I was accepted at all of them. But the problem is, with a Juilliard or a Manhattan School of Music, you have to figure out your own housing, because in those days they did not have dormitories. It's changed some now, but back then, no, you have to figure out how you're going to live. And I'm from a poor background. There was no trust fund baby here, Jay. So anyway, the thought was, I said, well, I had such an intense senior year at Interlochen. I said, I need to take a step back. Let me just take a step back and figure this out. Because money-wise, I don't. So I wanted to go to the
Manhattan, right?
Yeah. I wanted to go to Manhattan School of Music because there was a teacher there by the name of Robert Goldsand. He was a fantastic teacher. He was a pupil of Moritz Rosenthal, who in turn was a pupil of Franz Liszt. So his lineage was part of this grand romantic style of playing that pianists had, like Horowitz, Rachmaninoff, from that era, late 1890s, 1880s, into the turn of the century. All right. And that resonated with me, because even at that point, I was improvising and doing my own arrangements of tunes and stuff. And, but it was that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you were actually doing the arranging, from home, just by yourself, unassisted, creating variations of existing?
Yeah, I mean, all through my high school years, because I went to All Saints High School first for 3 years, and then to Interlochen Arts Academy. I was always improvising and creating my own medleys from musicals or songs or whatever.
Okay. So you were actually, from the composing, that was always kind of your thought, to really be on the composing improvisation end, or was it pure, I'm going to replay, particular sonata by Mozart, etc.?
Well,
it's bias.
Well, here's the deal. How my improvising and my arranging skills started was really my mom's doing. Because when I started lessons, I would say by the time, within 2 years of lessons, so I'm probably in first grade, starting into second grade, my mom would be in the kitchen, and of course she'd worry about me because I'd rather play than eat. So she'd be getting things ready for supper, and I'm playing, and she loved it. But what she would do is she'd hear me practice my lesson, what was expected of me for the following week. And then she'd say, hey, give it your own thing. And the language she used, she goes, give it the old Ricky tick. And what she was saying to me, without her realizing, she was giving me permission to go play the piece again, but do what I wanted with it.
On top of it.
Yeah. So once she gave me that permission, that turned into all sorts of freedom for me. And actually, I learned as I was getting more serious teachers and study, and especially at Interlochen, that they complemented each other. The technique that I had to develop to play the serious classical works certainly gave me freedom to do what I want improvising because I had technique. I mean, because you're born with, just like an Olympic athlete, you're born with abilities that just your body can do and maybe somebody else can't. Who knows why? It's just
Sure.
the coordination, brain,
Sure.
hands, the whole, okay.
Absolutely.
So those are gifts, and then it's how you develop them.
Absolutely.
And how far you can take them. Okay.
Right.
So having to develop my technique gave me freedom with my improvisations and creating arrangements.
So it's only a year
reverse-
though at Interlochen, right? I mean, so.
Well, but let me finish though, because
that.
the reverse of that is true. Having a mind that was free to improvise allowed me to interpret classical music and serious music with a freedom that most students do not have because they have to do it exactly as their teacher tells them. So I get into trouble because the teacher would say, well, this is the way. I go, well, why is it this way? Well, you got to put your finger on that note. Well, why? This doesn't work. So, it worked both ways. And I like that for me. I'm a kind of a hybrid that way. And I think that's why so early on in my life, I was attracted to Gershwin's music because it was played in the serious halls. He was writing serious works. He was writing pop songs. He was writing for Broadway. And it was all music to him. There were no divisions. There were no hard, fast lines being drawn, even though critics were trying to do that to him. And I kind of felt the same way about music. Why can't I play chamber music one day and show music the next? What was wrong with that? But that was taboo for a youngster because of my skills. They wanted me to go the route of the big competitions, Tchaikovsky competition, Van Cliburn, and I could have done it. I had the chops. There was no question. But it just, for what purpose? There are 5,000 other classical pianists, who play perfectly well. What is going to be my soapbox? What is going to be my directive? What am I going to contribute on a grander scale than just being another one they can hire and people listen and go, that was a pleasant evening?
It's a good question, and actually this dovetails exactly what I was going to ask you, which was that, from your experience, and now you're not new, you've seen and heard lots of different types of pianists. So you intentionally chose Gershwin because of the fact that it was your edge or because of your passion? Because I could certainly make the argument that, and you could hear it on YouTube or on, I literally have at least 10 to 20 versions of Chopin nocturnes or Beethoven sonatas. And now if you hear the third movement of Moonlight Sonata, you can see 20-year-olds rip this thing off in grandiose style with crazy technique and speed and power. And how would you be able to distinguish yourself amongst this 20 who hit record?
And of course, these four works of Gershwin, but especially Rhapsody in Blue and Concerto in F, are the most performed piano pieces in any given year. They have been for years. And if you stop and think, is there another, because they consider, even though it's Rhapsody in Blue, it's considered a piano concerto when they hire you. You're playing a concerto because you're the soloist. Right. Sure. But can you think of another American piano concerto that people request other than Gershwin's? No. And Barber wrote one, and Howard Hanson wrote one. I mean, you just go on there.
They're just a few.
Substantial American composers have written piano concertos, but they have not caught on. There's a reason for that. The other thing is, and I thought about this in more recent years, is, what was I thinking to make Gershwin an American music?
That's what I was thinking. That's where
my platform, because there are more recordings of Rhapsody, Blue, Concerto in F than any other piece for piano and orchestra. Oh yeah. I mean, next up would be Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto, Rachmaninoff's second Piano Concerto, and probably the Grieg A minor concerto. Those are like the three most popular for orchestras to play, for their audiences. Those are the ones people request. But I mean, pretty much every serious pianist worth their salt plays the Rhapsody in Blue and probably the Concerto Now. So why would I, why not pick something more obscure? Because it's like career suicide. But this is where Ed Jablonski came into the picture, the Gershwin biographer and writer who was from Bay City, because it was through him I got to play for Gershwin's inner circle of friends and his sister and family. And they were the ones that said, when I was a teenager, they said, you know, we never thought we'd hear the piano sound like George again. So there was that new layer added to it, because I didn't know I sounded like Gershwin. No,
how would you know? How would you know?
Like Gershwin? I wouldn't know. I was like, well, the first time I met Jablonski and he said that to me, you know, the first time he heard me play in his living room on a spinet, he said, you know, has anyone ever told you? Because I played a little Gershwin medley of my own creation and the first two piano preludes, which are the most famous ones. Okay. And after I got done on this little out of tune spinet in his living room, he and his wife were there. I'm 15 years old. I'm actually in New York to audition for Tanglewood for the summer. But I knew about Jablonski, and so I wanted to meet him. And that's a whole nother story on how that happened. But let me get to this one, which is basically when I played my little made-up Gershwin medley and the two preludes, the second I finished, he said, has anyone ever told you when you play Gershwin, you sound like Gershwin? So what happened then, 8 years later, my first trip to New York, and the moment I got into the hotel, the Americana Hotel, which I think is just a Sheraton now, I pulled out the Manhattan phone book, which was huge, probably almost as big as I was, turned the page to Jablonski, E, and there was a whole bunch of them. And I literally put my finger on one, called him,
and that was the right one?
And it was him, yeah. And I remember exactly what I said. I said, hello, is this Ed Jablonski? He goes, yes. I said, well, my name's Kevin Cole. I play the piano. I'm from Bay City, Michigan, and I love Gershwin. I might have said two.
You couldn't have made that up. You couldn't call up a random person and make that up, so you knew that.
No, I said, I love Gershwin too. And then there was this chuckle on the other end of the phone, and through our conversation, he and his wife invited me for supper the following night, and that's when I played for him. You know, that's the backstory to playing for him and him saying what he did. So what consequently happened, during parts of my summer, starting, you know, in my junior year, senior year, and then once I'm out of high school, I would go for a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks at a time, and stay with the Jablonskis.
I see.
And because they had kids, well, their youngest was my age, Emily, and they have another daughter, Carla, and David. And he would have these gatherings, and one in particular was when he had Gershwin's sister, Frances, her husband, Leopold Godowsky II, whose father was the famous classical pianist, Leopold Godowsky. Also, Leopold Godowsky II was one of the co-creators of Kodachrome for Kodak, so made a zillion off of that. And he also had Kay Swift, who was a paramour of Gershwin's, but a composer in her own right, who helped him write out Porgy and Bess, and, you know, was his right-hand gal, Emily Paley, and Mabel Shermer. And so he had this afternoon where I sat and I played my Gershwin medley. What he did first. Oh, that's right. Ed had a reel-to-reel recording of me playing the first movement of the Concerto in F, which I did at Interlochen, not by winning Interlochen's concerto competition, which I did not win. But Michigan, the state of Michigan, used to have a Michigan Youth Arts Festival, and Central Michigan University used to host it. They had an honors orchestra that would meet, I don't know, a couple of times a month down at the University of Michigan, made up of students, 125 students from all over the state. I think they had to audition for it. And then their prize was at the end of the school year, they would play this concert. And this particular year was going to be held at Interlochen, my senior year. So I entered the competition unbeknownst to my piano teacher at Interlochen, because he wanted me to stop playing the concerto now, blah, 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 all this stuff. So I literally forged his signature on the application for this competition, the Michigan Youth Arts Festival, because they had a string category, woodwinds, voice, piano, and brass. So I entered it. And and the only thing is, the night before, or the day before the competition, I told my teacher, I said, I want to play this, because I had to have a second pianist with me. My friend Jerry Schubert, she did the second piano, the orchestra part for the competition. I said, I want to play this for you because tomorrow I'm in this competition. He goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, no, I just want to play it for you and see what you say. So I played through it. He said, sounds terrific. I said, okay, well, I'm going to competition tomorrow. Bye. So we did. Long story short, I win first place, and you get to play, once you win, I think it was like 2 weeks later, on the air, on WCMU, on the radio, and I thought that was it. Well, the orchestra's prize, the Michigan Youth Arts Symphony, for having all these months of rehearsals, they were playing their own concert, and it just so happened to be at Interlochen the next day. So Roger Jacoby, who was the president of Interlochen, knew about this, called up Charles Gabriel, I think was the conductor's name at U of M, calls him up that week and says, you will program Kevin's movement of the Concerto in F as part of your Sunday program, won't you? So I was kind of vindicated because I didn't win Interlochen's competition. I brought my own orchestra in May. It was just like 3 weeks before graduating. And here I am, and they're doing all this other repertoire. And then I come on stage to play my one movement. And so it was a real blast. But so anyway, that recording is what I had a copy of it for Ed. He played it for the Gershwin family and inner circle of friends.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there on the bench of his little spinet, because I haven't played live for them yet, for this little afternoon tea party. And Jay, it was the creepiest thing, because I am all of, at that point, I think I would have been 17 or 18. It had to be, yeah, because I just graduated from Interlochen, and I think that was during that summer of 77 that this happened, I believe. All of a sudden, it was playing, and one got up and left the room. Another one gets up and leaves the room. Another one gets up and leaves the room, and they're coming back with tissue, and I'm a youngster. I'm thinking, oh my God, it's so bad. They're crying, not knowing that it wasn't because it was so bad. It was because they heard George Gershwin. I mean, they heard something that I have in my playing that evoked this connection they all had to George. And so when it was done is when Kay Swift, she said, I never thought I'd hear the piano sound like George again. And George's sister, Frankie, said, you have all these sharp rhythms, and it just like my brother did. So then they wanted to hear me live, I'm sure, to make sure that this was not some phony thing. So I played my Gershwin medley, and when I got done, it was really something. And then Kay Swift, who used to play two pianos with Gershwin, they'd improvise and work out stuff. It was suggested, Kay, why don't you join Kevin on the piano bench? And I was just like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So she said, well, what part do you want to play? Top part, bottom part? I said, well, I'll play the top part. So we picked a tune, because, what Gershwin tune do you pick? And we're just going to improvise on it. And it's a song called Dear Little Girl, which comes from his 1926 musical, OK, K-A-Y. But it wasn't written about Kay Swift because he hadn't met her yet, all right? So we start out the tune, and she's, playing the bass and chord, like rhythm kind of, and I'm doing the melody. Well, Jay, there was a point while we're playing that all of a sudden we went into the same lick. We went into the same rhythm, which was, somehow we were connected in such a way that we went into this really offbeat rhythm as we were playing the piece, going through it the second time. And we looked at each other, I remember, on the bench, and kind of smiled. And literally I felt I had done this before. And I'm not one of those, I'm not reincarnating George. No one will be George Gershwin. But, and luckily, it was recorded because Ed recorded that afternoon. And their comments, it's somewhere in my storage unit. I know it exists because he duped it down. It was a reel to reel. He duped it down to a cassette. So I have it somewhere.
So let's
But it
go
was
back to,
yeah.
so now you're discovered. I mean, you get your break,
Well,
right?
right.
You've met Gershwin's family, direct family,
Yeah.
and they have basically anointed you. From that point, are decades
Sure.
from then to now, from 18 to 18, you're a young man, teenager, not too early though by any means in a musician's life, right? I mean, 18, the cream of the crop is already has been identified,
Sure.
right, in
Sure.
violin or piano or whatever
Yeah.
instrument. Absolutely. So where did your career go from that point? Now you're a young adult. Did you go to formal schooling, or did you end up not doing that? Or?
Well, as I had mentioned, Manhattan School of Music, because of the teacher Robert Goldsand,
Sure.
was my school of choice. But here's what happened. The real story is I went to the audition on my audition day, and you're waiting out in a hallway, and the Manhattan School of Music building is actually the old Juilliard School of Music before Juilliard moved to Lincoln Center. Okay. So I'm, hearing other people play it. In fact, a couple of the people before me were playing the same Chopin Ballade No. 2. And, but that didn't freak me out at all, because I thought, well, and some of these were grad students, and I was auditioning for undergrad. So they didn't freak me out, because I thought, well, I played as well as that, so. But something happened to me, because I did realize that even if I got accepted and even if I got a full scholarship, how the hell am I going to live in New York? At that time, I mean, I'd have to get a job, and I'd have to figure. I had no way, because I was sleeping on friends' couches. I was at Jablonski's. I was at some friends in New Jersey. I was just bouncing around a lot of my Interlochen colleagues who had just graduated with me from the Arts Academy. Some were already going to Juilliard. Some were at different places. But they came from families of means where their parents could pay for an apartment monthly, and I don't. So it was the person just ahead of me that was doing their audition, mm-hmm. and I thought, I gotta leave. I can't do this. Why even waste your time? So I walked out.
So you did not go to the audition.
Well, but here's what happened. I walked out, got on the bus, went back to New Jersey, where I was staying with friends, so one of my Interlochen colleagues. But I had to have their phone number was the contact number. The very next day, Robert Goldsand, the piano teacher, calls me. Where were you? And he was from Vienna, so he had a little bit of an accent. Where were you? And I explained to him. I said, I just didn't feel worthy. He said, I want to see you this week. You come tomorrow to my studio, 6:00, and I want to see you and hear you. I said, okay. Because he had played at Interlochen my senior year. And that's where I heard him. And when I heard that, the tone, how he played, I was just like, oh my way. He could play a C major scale and make you weep. And I went, okay, I want that. I know I can do that. I want to know how to do that. So I went the next day, took the bus into the city, went to Manhattan School of Music. And I get into his studio, and he says, play what you're going to play for your audition. So I had a movement of Beethoven's Sonata. I had the Chopin Ballade, and then I had Gershwin 3 Preludes. Lo and behold, he had recorded on commercial recordings. He's actually, even though he's European born, he's recorded more American piano works at that time than any other pianist had. And he was the equal to Horowitz and Rubinstein, but he didn't have the PR machine behind him like they did, even though he had his Carnegie debut when he was 16.
He wasn't married to one. He also wasn't married to one of the composers.
Yeah. So anyway, I played
Horowitz. For people who didn't know, that's Vladimir Horowitz. But anyway, let's
So after I get done playing my audition works for him, he said, let's go back. And he always had this little stub of a cigar. I don't know if he really smoked it, but he had it there, and it wasn't lit or anything, but he was just so kind. And I remember noticing up close, because I hadn't seen his hands up close before, that he had the advantage physically that these 4 fingers were almost even across. As you notice, we have spaces,
Right.
He didn't. This finger was almost as long as that, and this one. So talk about for even touch, when they're almost, I thought, oh my word, I'm going to have an operation. Chop that up. No. So anyway, we went back through a few pieces, and what I loved about it, because I had these teachers that half the lesson was spent, they talked about what they did, who they did, made music with, blah, blah, blah. It was more about their career than it was about a lesson. And that can be entertaining, but I want to learn. Okay. I'm paying you to give me something of what you got so I can move on. He didn't do that. He said, okay, this measure here, play that for me, or at least 4 measures, and I'd play. And then he'd go, oh, why don't you try? And he'd show me something. And I'd go, okay. Everything he pointed out, and there weren't a lot, I'd say half a dozen, 8 different things and pieces. Everything, what he told me to do, fixed it immediately. No fuss, no muss, no pontificating, just try this. And I went, oh my God, this is amazing. So what happened to end the chapter with Goldsand was I studied privately with him because I could not afford to go to the school and live in Manhattan. So for about 6 months of sleeping on people's couches, I studied privately with him.
So in these decades, what's of all the places the venues you've played, the most spectacular, over the top location, at least in the United States, what would you call it?
Well, it's a trifecta. It's hard to say one. I mean, if I was really pressed to say one, it's got to be Carnegie Hall. I mean, that's every kid's dream, at least from my era, is to play Carnegie Hall. I did. It's funny. I played Gershwin with the Albany Symphony. It was part of a program that doesn't exist anymore that they would do called something had to do with Spring for Music, I think was what it was called. And the whole idea of this festival, it was a week-long festival, was they'd have 5 different orchestras. The orchestras had to submit a program of lesser-known works by American composers.
I see.
Things that aren't played as often. And so the Albany Symphony had already got on the program, and then so they submitted again. But if you've been on it 1 year, you have to skip a year. You can't reapply, so It's every 2 years. So David Allen Miller, the conductor, I remember very distinctly, because this is going to sound like name dropping, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. No problem.
But I was actually visiting my friend Dan Brown, the author of the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, is that right?
Books. Yeah. Well, that's another story. We became friends when I was out in LA back in the day, a struggling singer-songwriter. He was a struggling singer-songwriter, and we met.
Not struggling any longer.
No. But anyway, I was actually visiting him.
Okay.
In New Hampshire, when I got a call from David Allen Miller saying, "Hey, I'm going to submit this program to Carnegie Hall for this festival." He said, I want to do both Rhapsodies, the Rhapsody in Blue and the second Rhapsody, because the way we do Rhapsody in Blue is unlike anybody else. Even though it's a really well-known piece, the way we interpret it is so authentic to Gershwin, and putting the 2 Rhapsodies together. So he submitted that, but then the committee said, So it just became the second Rhapsody, which is the piece I had, at that point, played the least. I think I'd only played it 3 other times before Carnegie Hall. Excuse me. And then I thought, I don't care if he asked me to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, it's Carnegie Hall,
Right.
And it's taken me 50 years to get there. Okay. Because it happened in 2013. And so I did. I played the second Rhapsody, which is actually the name that Gershwin gave it was the New York Rhapsody. And then just like a couple of weeks before the premiere, someone said, oh, no, that's not. You need something that sounds more classy than that. So he said, all right, second Rhapsody, which I think is a horrible name because, second always sounds like it's not quite as good as the first Rhapsody.
So somewhere in between here, though, we spent time in Chicago from what it sounds like. So for people who don't know, Ravinia is a Chicagoland outdoor festival, a very huge one. The world's, leading performers almost always go there.
Since 1904, they've been around. And they are the country's largest summer music festival because they cover everything, rock, pop, classical, you name it. Yeah.
And during that period, at some point, you had a health scare.
I did. And it's actually, it was, it was when I moved back to Bay City. And lo and behold, let me see, when would that have been? Well, it would have been January of 2017. I just noticed that there was numbness on this side of my face. And then, as the months progressed, I noticed that my taste buds were off and the numbness was kind of halfway through the right side of my tongue. I noticed I was having some hearing problems with this ear. Excuse me. And every once in a while, I felt a little toddly. I'd be walking down the steps and all of a sudden I had to catch myself. And well, that's weird. But I felt such blockage at a certain point by Thanksgiving of 2017. I said, I better go see an ENT. Maybe there's some kind of infection, blah, blah, blah. And from that meeting, he said, you got to have an MRI. From that MRI, he said, you have an acoustic neuroma, which I'd never heard about. It's a, certain kind of tumor. He said, you have to go see Dr. Babu at the Michigan Ear Institute down near Novi, Birmingham area, north of Detroit. Went to see him. He showed me the MRI. Said it's pretty big. We got to get this out of you. So March 19th of 2018, I had an 8-hour surgery to remove a life-threatening tumor, brain tumor. What's so weird is that it never impeded on my performing. In fact, I did a concert the Saturday, was it the Saturday? Either the Friday or Saturday. I think it was the Saturday, prior to the Monday of my surgery with Sylvia McNair in Ohio. And she drove me to Ascension St. John's Hospital in Novi after that concert in Ohio. And I played for her. And so it was very odd. I had things that were bothersome, but never to the point where it stopped my performing. And I didn't really realize how serious it was, which I guess is a hidden blessing. Everyone else around me knew
I'm freaked out now. So
yeah, this was kind of life and death, and I never felt that. I felt in good hands with my surgeons. I just thought, well, they'll get this out of me, and that'll be that. And lo and behold, after this, that was just showing me a little low power is what it's showing me. Part 2 might have to come up in a minute. But anyway, I had the surgery, and what I did was, and I had heard that surgeons listen to music sometimes when they when they operate. And since this was an 8-hour, it's an 8-hour surgery if it goes well. It's 12 hours if it doesn't go well. So I handed Dr. Babu assistant when I got in that morning, early morning, the CD and said, hey, if they listen to music, this is my Cole Plays Gershwin CD. So I heard after the fact that he had played it because he gets everything ready. And then another doctor comes to do the lifting of the tumor off. So I heard after the fact that Dr. Babu told the other doctor, you got to hear this.
This is the actual.
Yeah, you got to hear this. So they listened to it. He listened to it, and the second surgeon listened to it. And I came out of surgery, and what was funny was the first thing I said to doctors, because they put you in a waiting area post-op, and I could see this guy in a white coat walking towards me. It's kind of blurry, but as he came into focus, I remember the first thing I said was, "There's my angel," and he kind of smiled. And I put my hand out, and he grabbed my hand, and the first real thing, I looked at him and I said, did I make it? Am I still here? So I said,
was there any concern? I mean, you had to be concerned, obviously, at some point. Any concern that you'd be able to, that there would be, a barrier to start playing again?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I didn't touch the piano for about 5.5 weeks. And I had a concert scheduled with David Allen Miller and the Albany Symphony for May 18th. 8 weeks to the day of the surgery. I didn't call David till 2 weeks before the surgery to tell him.
By the way.
Yeah, because this concert had been on the books, and I had agreed.
Sure.
It was supposed to be all 4 Gershwin works, 2 one night, 2 the next night. But because of rehearsal schedules and unions and all this other stuff, it was all going to be one concert. And so I agreed with David that fall, before I was diagnosed with this, that I will play, I've never done this, I'll play all 4 works in one night, which is, nobody's ever done that. All 4 Gershwin works, one night. It's impossible, basically. It's like Michael Phelps winning 11 gold medals.
Gold medals all the same day.
Yeah. So anyway, 2 weeks before, I'm calling David Allen Miller and going, now I just want to talk to you about the concert. Oh, sure. Everything okay? Yeah, but I'm going to have brain surgery in 2 weeks, but it should be okay. Well, no, just you bow out. Well, I'll just make it an orchestra concert. I said, no, I need a goal. I said, if I can play 1 piece, you get 1. If I can play 2, I said, we'll just see what happens. Because I had no idea.
What did the doctor say? What did the doctor say? He must have set some expectation for you.
You know, they didn't put any kind of expectation as far as music on me.
What they just said, we have no idea. Let's find out when you come out.
Well, I mean, they didn't see anything physically that should prevent it. It's just a matter of adjusting to the hearing.
Really?
For me, and then also because of hearing and because the brain is healing, does it affect any brain finger coordination?
Yeah, right. That's what
I mean. It didn't. Really asking. Yeah, it didn't seem to, from the test they gave me. But again, the tests aren't playing the piano, and the tests aren't about, a 65, I don't know, maybe plus pages of concerto that I hope is still in my head, as well as another 50 for the rhapsody. So I got 300 to 400 pages of music that I hope I can recall in my head.
Right.
Maybe it's okay, but you don't know. So when I sat down to play, the first thing I had to realize is that, I'm not stereo anymore, I'm mono. So it was just like going from Technicolor to black and white. Right. But I said, okay. I guess I was concerned.
That doesn't seem that bad. I mean,
yeah, I was just
all else equal.
Yeah, but I was just concerned that I didn't want to overcompensate and play louder like a Beethoven, because I can't hear it. But I came to the realization that it's not 80% hearing, 20% physical. It's 50-50, at least for me. That I know from touch my loudest louds and my softest softs. But I had never analyzed this before. I just do it. Why would I analyze? This is what I do. This is what I'm built to do. But now I had to think about my relationship to creating music. So that was the other thing. The biggest thing, outside of knowing that I can feel it physically as well as hear it, that they're equal, I have to figure out, do I still have the same connection emotionally and inside when I play? Because I'm hearing half of what I used to hear.
Did you know that your memory of the 400 pages of music and that there's technique that you've practiced and muscle memory. Yeah. I mean, I would have freaked out that you wake up and you don't know if that's intact. Or did you kind of have some idea when you were yourself?
The first thing I played was a little passage from the Rhapsody in Blue. And the first thing I noticed, of course, was the hearing. And then I played it again. And then I started to talk to myself and say, well, what's different? And I said, other than hearing it at half volume, am I still connected to what I'm playing? And once I realized I was, then I thought, well, okay, I can deal with this. I still feel the same. Sure. And so I'll just see what happens. So the night of the concert, we had rehearsals that week, and I had to watch my energy, obviously, because I'm still recovering. The bandage came up, but I had this huge, bandage thing. I looked like Princess Leia with a big on my ear, cinnamon bun. And so, but I didn't know my stamina because I didn't quite have the energy, but I needed to have the energy if I was going to get through 4 pieces one night, plus an encore. I think I played 2 encores, but it was there and I did it. And I don't know if they did an archival recording or not. I didn't ask. I should ask. They usually do, but it felt great. And I figured if I could do that 8 weeks after brain surgery, when I'm not really full power and I can still get through the 4 pieces, I'm going to be fine.
So now an 8-year-old person comes to you and says, Kevin, Mr. Cole, I like music. What are you going to tell him?
How much do you like it? You like it as a hobby? They wouldn't realize the word hobby is kind of old-fashioned. Do you like it because you just enjoy it for yourself, or are you saying you want to be a performer in front of thousands
I
of
want to be a
people?
performer. So now what should I do?
Study and really fine-tune your craft and decide what type of music is going to be your platform. How,
decide
because it
at
doesn't,
8?
you can't be, well, even at 8 years old, yeah, unless you're some kind of child prodigy, okay, it's not too early to, you should explore all genres of music for piano, because something's going to speak to you, and it may speak to you early, or it may speak to you as a teenager, or even later. Excuse me. People have to realize George Gershwin wasn't born a prodigy like a Mozart and all these others. He didn't come to music till he was like 10, 11 years old. In fact, he thought that anyone that played music of his classmates was a sissy. And he'd get in fights about it. He could care less about music. But he heard a classmate of his in a school recital play Dvorak's Humoresque on the violin. And for some reason, that kid, Max Rosen, was a friend of Gershwin. I don't know how he slipped through because he played music. But after Gershwin heard that piece of music, it unlocked something in him that he wanted to go into music. I mean, so much so that he went to a neighbor. I don't know if he had a store, but he had a player piano at this, I'll say, general store. And Gershwin would skip school, and he was going to that player piano, pumping it, putting his fingers in where the keys would go down, and taught himself 2 pop songs of the day that way with no piano lessons because he was so driven. So when Mama Gershwin decided that their little house in Brooklyn, they needed a piano because her sister had a piano, and that was kind of a status thing. Piano came through the window, and they thought Ira, the older brother, would be the one to get lessons. George ran to it, sat down, and played those 2 pieces. And his mom and dad and Ira were all floored because this is George, who they thought would become a bum. He was the ruffian. He was the roller skate champ. He could care less about music. So then he started his lessons. So you never know when the calling, hits and what piece of music speaks to you that unlocks that as the key. And for me, it was that movie. Boom. For George, it was Dvorak's Humoresque, which is perfect because it has that little blue note da, 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 at the end. And that, I'm sure, all of a sudden, like, what is that? And for an 8-year-old, who knows? Who knows what it is? But I would just say, if you really want to be a performer, you study from as many people as you can and take all that information and keep playing different types of music. And all of a sudden you'll say, one week it'll be this song you like, the next week it'll be this song, but eventually it'll turn into something.
If it was the same person, 18, I just have this thought. Am I too late?
No.
I don't have a decade of piano. I mean, you're 18, you have 10 years of experience already. You're sitting already as a winner of a competition, sitting at a national music camp, at a prodigy today.
Right.
Can they be discovered at 18? And
well, sure.
Time?
Well, but look at an Irving Berlin. Okay, he was not known as a pianist, but certainly wrote more hit songs than just about anybody. He could only play the piano in one key that he's taught himself. He couldn't read music, couldn't write down his own music, so he had to hire music secretaries. He'd call them at 2 a.m. You got to come down. He'd play it. They'd take notation as he's playing it. And he did okay. I mean, I don't think he went to school more than a year as a kid. Some days as a little kid, he only had an apple as his entire meal for a day that he had to steal off a cart. And so you just don't know. And he had his biggest hit musical at the age of 57, Annie Get Your Gun. So, yeah, it's just a toss-up.
Almost.
Yeah, and with social media and the way we can do things,
True.
out of sci-fi. Yeah, it makes careers overnight, or at least gets your attention faster than ever.
All right, Kevin. So thank you so much. So
you bet.
We've got the album. We've got centennial, right, for these
I hope. Like I said, I'm working on that right now because now's the time to formulate a tour and see who will book me. So I'm in talks this week and next week, and it's going to take a few weeks to coordinate and put our package together. But I sure hope anybody seeing this, if you got a symphony orchestra in your backyard, put in a good word. I'm always telling people when they go, "Oh, we want to have you back." If somebody afterwards, I'm signing a program, I say, "Put in a good word for me." I'll do that. I said, "Well, yeah," because if they hear feedback and say, "We want Kevin back," I come back.
You know? Absolutely. That's your best referral. Yeah. Naxos, we've got Concerto in F by Kevin Cole. What is the word that they're, and I've seen the other reviews as well, but check out the links in the podcast as well as the video, links to the album that's sitting up on, you can buy it on Amazon. I saw the album on Spotify. You can listen to it there as well. I'm not sure if you even knew that, but it's there. Naxos, a huge label. Congratulations, Steve. And that's quite an achievement. I mean, like I said, I've got literally over 1,000 classical CDs. And so I would know, at least there's the Deutsche Grammophones and the Angels, and the EMIs, etc. And of course, Telarc, and certainly out there is Naxos and, that niche group of, very highly specialized musicians, etc. And, congratulations. That's pretty.
Thank you. Thanks, Jay. This has been fun.
I've enjoyed it as well. Kevin Cole, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you.
See ya.
If you want to hear the full conversation, it's up on the Maximize Your Medicare podcast. You can get to by Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you digest your podcast. Look for the Maximize Your Medicare podcast. You can hear the entire unedited version of our conversation. Took about 90 minutes. Fact of the matter is, probably a Freudian slip. I screwed up Zoom, and so you couldn't see our faces side by side. Then again, I was realizing, well, that's probably a good thing. Who knows? Anyway, hopefully you liked today's video. Please like and subscribe. It lets other people discover the Maximize Your Medicare channel, as you can hear, and there's a reason for that tag, much more than Medicare. I'm Jay. Speak with you next time.